course, the BFG said. If I is giving a girl dream to a boy, even if it was a really whoopsie girl's dream, the boy would be waking up and thinking what a raw, bungling, sleuthing old dream that was. Boys would, Sophie said. These here is all girls' dreams on this shelf, the BFG said. Can I read a boy's dream? You can, the BFG said, and he lifted her to a higher shelf. The label on the nearest boy's dream jar read as follows: I is making myself a marvelous pair of suction boots, and when I put them on, I is able to walk straight up the kitchen wall and across the ceiling. Well, I is walking upside down on the ceiling when my big sister comes in and she is daring to yell at me as she always does, yelling, is what on earth is you doing up there walking on the ceiling? And I looks down at her and I smiles and I says, I told you you was driving me up the wall and now you has done it. I find that one rather silly, Sophie said. Boys wouldn't, the BFG said, grinning. It's another ring beller. Perhaps you has seen enough to know. Let me read another boy's one, Sophie said. The next label said, the telephone rings in our house and my father picks it up and says in his very important telephone voice, Simpkins, Simpkins speaking. Then his face goes white and his voice goes all funny and he says, what? Who? And then he says, yes, sir, I understand, sir, but surely it is me you is wishing to speaky to sir, not my little son. My father's face is going from white to dark purple, and he is gulping like he has a lobster stuck in his throat. And then at last he is saying, yes, sir, very well, sir, I will get him, sir. And he turns to me and he says in a rather respectful voice that I is knowing the president of the United States. And I says, no, but I expect he is sharing about me. Then I is having a long talk on the phone and saying things like, let me take care of it, Mr. President. You'll bungle it all up if you do it your way. And my father's eyes is goggling right out of his head, and that is when I is hearing my father's real voice saying, get up, you lazy slob, or you will be late for school. Boys are crazy, Sophie said. Let me read this next one. Sophie started reading the next label. I is having a bath and I is discovering that if I press quite hard on my tummy button, a funny feeling comes over me and suddenly my legs say I is not there, nor is my arms. In fact, I is still there. In fact, I mean, in a has become absolutely invisible all over. I is still there, but no one can see me, not even myself. So my mummy comes in and says, "Where is that child? He was in the bath a minute ago, and he can't possibly have washed himself properly." So I says, here I is, and she says, "Where?" And I says, "Here," and she says, "Where?" And I says, "Here," and she yells, "Henry, come up quick." And when my daddy rushes in and I is washing myself, and my daddy my daddy sees the soup floating around in the air, but of course he is not seeing me, and he shoots, "Where are you, boy?" And I says, "Here," and he says, "Where?" And I says, "Here," and he says, "Where?" and I says, "Here," and he says, "The soap, boy, the soap is flying in the air." Then I press my tummy button again, and now it's visible. My daddy is squiffy with excitement, and he says, "You is the invisible boy." And I says, "Now I is going to have some fun." So when I is out of the bath and I have dried myself, I put on my dressing gown and slippers, and I press my tummy button again to become invisible, and I go down into the town and walk in the streets. Of course, only me is invisible, but not the things I is wearing. So when people is seeing a dressing gown and slippers floating along the street with nobody in it, there I is a panic with everybody yelling, a ghost," and people is screaming left and right, and big strong policeman is running for their lives, and best of all, I see Mr. Grummet, my algebra algebra teacher, coming out of a pub, and I float up to him and say, "Boo," and he lets out a frightsome howl, and that's he's back into the pub, and then I's waking up and feeling happy as a whip's quitter